All right, so I want to thank you for paying attention and listening to this video. I'm doing something a little bit different, so I usually talk about safety in class, but I figured this is something that we can do modeling effective instruction called a flipped environment, which we're going to talk about in class as well. But before we actually do anything in class, I want to talk about science, and specifically safety in science, because you can never be too careful with it. So pause it, think for a little bit. 93% of science teachers say the following, that the number one cause of accidents in the science lab are due to what? So I want you to pause it, stop and think, write down your answers. What do you think is the number one cause of accidents? Basically, it's a failure to follow instructions. I know probably a lot of people say like, oh, students being rowdy, and that all kind of comes back to not listening and not following instructions. Now, where do you think most of these accidents occur? Well, nationally, 70% of all high school science lab accidents occur where? So pause it again, think about where do activities happen, or where do these accidents happen in a science class? Now you might be thinking like, wait a minute, I'm going to be elementary, this doesn't affect me. Well, actually it does, once you understand the reasoning why and why I want to spend so much time in it. So pause it, think about why it is, or where it is. Actually, 9th grade. Why do you think it's in 9th grade? What makes 9th grade so, where 70% of accidents happen? Well, the reason is that basically 9th grade teachers have the least amount of experience with science, and they also have the worst classroom. Now, the reason why I share this is because with elementary school, a lot of you probably might not have even done science experiments, but let alone have the knowledge as to what the safety aspects are. So that's why this is pretty important, why I want you to really pay close attention to it. Well, science, you got to understand, it's exciting, it's dynamic, it's how the world works. It's why I love science. It describes what we're doing, how it works, and part of that quest is to learn these new things, to understand. There's more questions that we don't have answers to than things that we do understand. And even things that we understand, once you start looking at it smaller and smaller, we don't really know. There is a combination, though, that safety plays into it. For you to understand science, we're going to be doing a lot of activities, a lot of hands-on stuff. That is science, that exploration. The process of doing things is just as important as the knowledge that's gained from it. So what you got to remember, though, is that these experiments sometimes will use materials that could be potentially harmful both to you and the students. So there's going to be a question that you always need to ask yourself. Does the educational importance of what you're doing, does that outweigh the potential for harm? Now, in everything, in every world, in every decision you make, there is this balance of, is the gain worth the possible risk? It's a risk-benefit analysis. So in science, when you're doing labs, is what the educational gain going to be outweighing the possibility of something happening to you or the students? So what we try to do is we want to try to minimize those dangers as much as possible by using proper safety practices. So as instructor, one thing you kind of need to know is that you need to instruct and you need to be that model supervisor in the classroom. So you can't say, oh, I don't like wearing goggles, I'm not going to do it. No, you need to put the goggles on if you're dealing with high class, if you're dealing with these things. You need to model and you need to provide the safe facilities, and you need to make sure that if there's any equipment, especially if you're going to be a science lab instructor or a supervisor, because a lot of elementary positions are becoming specialized. So for example, you have an iron sulfide lab, and this was a popular chemistry experiment, but one of the things is that you need to actually be very careful because the iron powder can cause irritation. It can cause burning if it's not done properly. So you have to think about, is it worth doing this lab? So as an instructor, I need to make sure my students are on task and listening, go over the instructions before you do the lab, model it, make them know what's going on, and don't be one of those teachers who are like, okay, they're all doing their lab, I'm going to go up and sit and grade. You need to supervise. You need to be there and model and focus on them. So here's a specific case, and I'm going to describe the case, and then I want you to stop, pause it, write a reflection as to who you think is at fault and why. 8th grade science class, doing a dissections with the flowers that you can see here. And First period, this happened in Wisconsin in 2009. So these are actual cases. First period, 2 students get cut. Minor, nothing serious. They don't need to go to the nurse. It was put a Band-Aid on it and fine. Move forward. This teacher writes up a report saying that moving forward, maybe we don't need the X-Acto knives. Maybe we could use something else moving forward. Second period, nothing happens. Third period, nothing happens. After lunch, last class of the day, the X-Acto knife is kind of stuck in a little plastic. If you ever use an X-Acto knife, you know there's little plastic casing. So it's stuck. It's kind of stuck. So the student is sitting there, and he's pulling at it. And what happens is when he pulls it out, you can see he slices his finger, tears ligaments, loses some movement with his fingers. Who's at fault and why? Pause it, write down a reflection, try to talk about why you think that is and who is at fault. So, the student needed reconstructive surgery. He severed his tendon. Teacher was at fault. The reason was that the teacher was aware of the injury. The teacher was aware of the possibility of what could happen. Even in that first period, they wrote in the report, maybe I should change what I'm doing. We don't really need an X-Acto knife. But we have it in our minds sometimes that, I'll change it for next year. No, do it now. You should have stopped using the X-Acto knives, put them away. You could have used scissors or something to do the exact same educational activity. You didn't need the X-Acto knife. So the teacher was actually knew about the known danger, kept doing it. Therefore, the teacher was actually marked negligent, and the teacher was held responsible for this. So moving forward, I'm going to give you a couple case studies, and these are the worst case scenarios. And a lot of times you're not going to have anything like this. You're going to do a couple demos. It's simple stuff. But it's important to know and think about these activities from a different standpoint to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. Because as a teacher, you need to take those precautions. The greater the degree of danger, the younger the student, the greater the degree of inclusion. Now, we want to include all of our students, but if you have someone who has epileptic seizures, you may not want them around glassware, especially if you're going to be heating with something like that. So are you going to do something as a demo compared to are you going to do it hands-on? I can do more with you as college students because you're older, you're more responsible. However, in an elementary classroom, I might want to do some really neat science stuff, and yes, you're going to want them to do hands-on. Yes, you're going to want them to do those activities, but you need to think about, for this grade level, for this age level, can I do this? Can I do a candle activity and let them hold a match with an open flame, or do I need to do this as a demo? So, here's another situation. Is a safe classroom the responsibility of the teacher? This was, Landon's name was Bush versus the Oscoda area schools. This one is from Michigan. In this situation, the teacher was complaining to the principal, and it was actually written, and this was on written notes, and so there was a paper trail of the teacher talking to the principal saying that I cannot adequately do labs in here. The tables are shabby. It was poor conditions. There were too many students. It was overcrowded. They were doing a lab where there was an alcohol burner, and the alcohol burner got knocked over, and it actually set a student on fire. In this lab, there was no extinguisher close by, so the student got some pretty severe burns. Pause it, and I want you to think about, in this case, who's at fault? Is it the teacher, or is it the principal, or is it both? Is it the student? Pause it, write it down. What do you think is going to be the case? In this situation, both were actually at fault. The principal was put on notice because he is in charge of the school, or she, depending upon who the principal was, is in charge of the overall safety of the school. So the principal should have done something different with that particular situation. However, the teacher knew that the conditions were not safe, that this was not ideal condition to do the lab, especially one where the fire extinguisher was not close by. So because the teacher knew that there wasn't the adequate area, the teacher was also negligent in that regard. So in this particular situation, both the teacher and the principal were held at fault. And again, so the key points, when you're doing this, make sure the labs correspond to what you're doing in the classroom. I don't have a safety shower. I don't have an eye wash station. So we can't do anything chemistry related where there's a possibility you could get fumes in your eye or something of that nature. So if you don't have a science lab room, you need to be very careful as to what science labs that you could do. This goes back to that risk education benefit analysis. So what makes a safe classroom? Well, you're going to be primarily responsible for the curriculum and how the room is going to be arranged. So needless to say, you need a safe learning environment. If you don't have the safety equipment, you can't do the lab. Okay? How do you notify supervisors? Keep a written record. Keep a written trail. Don't just do a hall conversation, because what happens there is like, oh, I don't remember that. Oh, I thought you meant this. No, you said this. This is what you were talking about. Case in point, where I was having issues in one of the classes I was teaching. It was a science lab, and there was hornets in the walls, and I was having bees in my classroom, and this was a safety issue. One of my students came up. Janitors weren't doing anything multiple times. One of my students came up and said, oh, well, I'm allergic to bee stings. So I notified the nurse in writing, say, what do I do if my student gets stung because I can't get these bees out of the class? You would be amazed how quickly that area got taken care of. So what do you do to promote safety in your classroom? And I'm going to, in addition to these, we're going to show you a couple others I'll have a couple links for. So one is a safety contract. Now, I've seen teachers who actually do this with their students. Like, what do you think is important? This way students get buy-in, and you can make sure that, oh, we can't be running around. Oh, I can't have loose hair. Oh, I need to be listening to the teachers. So sometimes you can make them own. There are others that are available online. Show a safety video. I'm going to give you a couple links, and in the module, we're not going to have to put them here, but you will see the links. Have fun with them. There's some great music videos out there that are science safety, and they're fun. Give a safety quiz, before you do any science experiments. What do you think is going to be the proper procedure? Again, going back, you need to be that role model. You need to be the one to set the example of, I need to model good behavior. Explain. Talk about what are the hazards. We might think, and I'm guilty of this as well too. When I did a chemistry lab, when you probably all made the silly putty, you had to use powders that I could buy in laundry detergent aisles. Well, once it's in a classroom, it now becomes a chemical. So sometimes I can buy things in the store, like Funky Flames from Walmart, or Borax, the laundry detergent. It's now a chemical. So make sure students know what it is. Every lab, if there's anything that you need to talk about with safety, make sure you go over it. Include a safety section if you do lab reports, if you have students do some type of activities. My fourth grader just did a lab report. This is my observation, this is my data. Throw in the safety section. Was there anything I need to be concerned about? On exams, throw in safety questions. We have this belief that if it's not on the exam, it's not important. You probably ask, is this going to be on the test? Meaning, if it's not on the test, I don't need to know it. So why don't we put safety questions? Why don't we put these type of questions on the exams to show, like, this is important? Document safety instruction, document discussions, put it in your syllabus. If you have like a science or something like that, put it in your lesson plan. This is our safety activities. This is what we're going to be doing. And enforce the rules. Just like a parent, yes, I'm going to be your friend, but I'm also your parent first. So as a teacher, you're going to be their teacher first. Your goal is to make sure they're safe in these environments. So Flynn has contracts for middle school and high school. Those are things you can look at just to kind of get some general ideas. Again, it's reinforcing it. You can even send it home with the parents and have the parents look at it, have the parents sign it. Quiz, test their knowledge. So you need to make sure with classroom management, enforce the rules. With each lab, what do you need to do? 1, be prepared. You need to know exactly what's going on. Practice the lab. If it's something new that you've never done before, you want to practice it out. Make sure you know exactly what's going on. Think about it from your student's perspective. What are things they could do? How could they do this? And where could they possibly hurt themselves? Do a pre-lab to confirm the students are informed and aware. Sometimes as a homework, a lot of teachers will say like, okay, go home, read over the lab, answer these questions. And that's kind of their homework for their pre-lab activity. Near misses are important. We say, almost had an accident, it was a near collision, whatever. Report them, adjust the procedures. There are things that are going to happen. It might be like, I never thought this could happen. I never thought they would actually do this. Is this something that you need to adjust your procedures for? Is it part of your safety that you need to discuss and you need to look at? What do you have to do? And make sure you keep a written record of these and how you adjusted to it. There are still going to be accidents that happen, and sometimes they're unavoidable, and you're not responsible for accidents if you're doing everything that you possibly can. If this is something completely different, you may not be responsible. Manage the classroom. We always talk about, hey, we can't talk too loud, or we can't do this, no running around, no, you need to pay attention. Safety when you're doing signs, imperative here in these situations. Do it all year. Don't just think like, okay, I'm going to talk about safety in the beginning and I'm never going to come back to it because, I did it back in the beginning. Do it in front of every lab. Talk about what could be the things that happen here. If you're doing chemicals, use the smallest amounts that are possible for the lab. There's a lot of stuff with videos online. So you can even just sometimes replace, if it's chemicals, with videos. Don't allow students to take chemicals or equipment home. And finally, be proactive. Don't be reactive. Think about all those possible situations of what could happen in a science classroom. Now, like I said, some of you might not do all that much science. It might be very simple procedures, so you may not have to worry much of science. But there might be some of you that, and I know, and I've had them in the past, that want to be a science supervisor. And some schools rather, are now hiring specific science teachers in elementary school. So you're really going to need to know this. I want to make sure all of our bases are covered. So here's another situation. A teacher wants to demonstrate the reactivity of alkali metals. The teacher drops a pound of sodium into a basket full of water, and the kids are looking into it. Some extra information about this. The teacher was an experienced teacher. The teacher never did this experiment before. Sodium is a reactive element in water. As a result, she drops a pound of bucket into it, and the sodium produces hydrogen gas, which burns. This created a major explosion. This caused burns to 15 students. Since the students were looking into the waste paper basket that she was doing the experiment in, one of the students had severe eye damage. So this is what happened. So stop it, pause it, write down what were the cardinal rules that were broken. Now, probably there's a couple that you probably said, and one piece of information I didn't give you: the kids were not wearing goggles. However, the teacher was. The teacher thought it was important to wear goggles, but she didn't have the students wear them. Another area was the teacher didn't practice the demo. And finally, the amount was way too much. If you're going to use sodium, which I really wouldn't recommend in elementary unless you're a science specialist and you're comfortable with it, and only do it as a demo with the students behind, you're going to use it a small amount. So goggles are important. I know they're not fashionable. I know they're not trendy, but you need to wear them. Your eyes are one of your most important things for your human body. So if your eyes get damaged, you can't replace them. Yeah, there's actually 3D technology now that's printing human eyes, but we're still a ways off, so don't bet on the fact that you're going to get your eyes replaced. Anytime you're using chemicals, heat, if you're using glassware, if there's any type of pressure, so if we do a balloon lab, for example, you're going to wear goggles. And I know there's different types, but these, you're probably not going to be wearing, using chemicals or hazardous chemicals, but there are also chemical splash goggles that are more protective if you're going to be using those type of situations. I've had students in want to teach middle school, want to teach high school, so I want to make sure we're all covered. No pun intended. Well, okay, actually there was a pun intended. So using the goggles, there's a lot of different ways you can demonstrate it. Show your students, like, look, we need to wear our goggles. Encourage and enforce. So one thing that you can do that the students actually love is what's called a pie in the face demo. You just put goggles on and you get a whipped cream pie, and you allow one of your students to basically pie you in the face with it, with the goggles on. So what happens is, after you get pied in the face, put the pie down, take your goggles off. Lo and behold, your eyes are protected. We can do damage and fix with the skin, but your eyes, you really can. If you mess them up, you're done. So you need to remember that you need to set the tone. If they don't listen, give detention, give an automatic 0. Think of another consequence for your students that aren't following the rules. This is one area that you can't be like, oh, okay, I really don't like him either. I know it gets all fuzzy and I don't like wearing them either. I get the little marks around my head or whatever. No. That's going to be the first question you're asked if you're dealing with anything like this, is were the students wearing goggles if they got something in their eye? And if they weren't, the question is going to be, why weren't they? And you're going to be responsible for that part. So for safety, if something does come in contact with the eyes, rinse it out. So if you're going to be a science supervisor, if you have a science lab, make sure you know where everything is, whether that's an eye wash station. So you're going to want to make sure that you wash it out with a lot of water. Overkill here is good. We don't want to underkill something, you want to overkill it. So try and have like an eye wash station. If you're in an older classroom, you might have a full body shower. I had one in my classroom. They never put the drain in for it, but I had the shower that worked, which, one of my students tested on me one time. So you always want to make sure you have that kind of stuff available. So again, make sure that even if you only got stuff in one eye, make sure you treat it for both of them and run it for 20 minutes. This is typically what you would probably use most often as teachers, this type of eye wash station. Now, you also have other pieces of equipment called safety showers and body drenches, which you can use depending upon. If you're going to be in a high school chemistry, this is probably what you're going to be using. So most of you won't be using this much, but you might. So again, if there's something where you get fire or something on that, you douse chemicals on your skin, do it here. Large amounts of water over the body. Flush again for 15. This can be, again, body drenches, eye washes. If you're using something with chemicals, you're going to need one or two, either safety shower or body drench or some type of station like this in the room. Okay? So, fire safety is another possibility. It can happen in your classroom. So you want to make sure you know where everything is at. So what you need to do is make sure you follow your school safety plan, know what the rules are. If there's a fire alarm and there's an experiment going on, you need to think about, like, what do I need to do in this situation? I had a case where the alarm went off, and it was in between classes at lunchtime. So you could imagine the kind of chaos that ensued at that point in time, knowing who was responsible for what. If the fire starts in your room, follow the plan, evacuate the students that are in danger, and then sound the alarm. If there's a fire that's spreading, don't fight the fire if it's spreading rapidly or if it's blocking an exit. So if you don't know how to use the equipment, again, leave the building. This is something where, if you've never used a fire extinguisher, go to a fire department and say, like, hey, I'm going to be teaching, I'm going to be doing a lot of science experiments. I hope I never need to use one, but can you just show me how to use it? And they'll be more than happy to show you. Close the doors behind you, close the hallway doors. Now, here's another case study. They were doing a flame test using metallic salts. You can actually buy these salts in Walmart. If you go to the sporting and goods section in the outdoors and look for funky flames, these are actually little salts that will cause the fires to change different colors. And I mean, they're pretty cool. One of the dishes starts to go out. Now, the teacher picks up a gallon of methyl alcohol. He pours the alcohol directly into the dish. The teacher says, I probably shouldn't be doing this. Now, the teacher was known for being lenient. The teacher had a reputation already. Told the students, don't bother wearing the geeky looking goggles. That was what the teacher was saying. Now, 3 kids got burned badly during this experiment. And in fact, the teacher had an 11-year-old son who was visiting at that point in time and set his son on fire. 2 of the students got burned very badly. Now, the teacher did use the fire blanket to smother the fire on the son. He was not hurt badly. Pause it. Let's think about what were the many things the teacher did wrong. And the victims, the teacher, that there was going to be some fault. How much do you think they were awarded for this? So pause it. What do you think? The victims were awarded $18.9 million from the school for the teacher's negligence. So we need to think about, like I said, being that role model. You need to be that good role model for the students. If you're dealing with chemicals, if you're dealing with fire, use goggles. So knowing about fire extinguishers, know that there's different types. What are A, B, C, D? They're not just letters that you get in this class or something like that. If it's a dry chemical extinguisher, A, B, C. Extinguishers last for about 30 seconds, and you have what's called the pass procedure. Pull the pin, aim the handle, squeeze the trigger, and sweep. Now, you can go to a fire department and say, if you've never used it, because it's that initial shock of like, okay, it turns on, and I get a little scared. But if you've actually ever used one, you know it's not that bad. So sweep the fire. You want to make sure to, again, it's something you never want to use, only if you have to, so try and use prevention. If you do have any flammable chemicals, if you're a science teacher, keep them stored in a specific type of cabinet. You don't keep certain chemicals together. You don't keep them in wooden cabinets if they're flammable. Okay? Fire blankets are terrific and they're cost effective. Get them out, you wrap the person up in them. They can easily be pulled out, wrap the person who's on fire. It can also be placed over a burning object because what happens is the blanket cuts off the oxygen supply. Remember, if you have a fire, you need a source, you need heat, and you also need oxygen. So if you don't have oxygen, if you don't have the fuel for the fire, you're not going to have the fire. Aprons and gloves. So depending upon the labs that you're going to be doing, you might need more materials. Typically, you don't wear shorts if you're dealing with any type of chemicals because if you think about it, especially short shorts, pants provide a layer of protection, as do aprons, to your skin. So that if you are working at a lab bench and you drop a chemical on you and you have shorts on, the chemical's going to go straight to the skin. Shoes have to have your feet covered. You can't have open-toed shoes. We're in Florida. This is going to be an issue. A lot of people like to wear sandals. But if you're doing labs with chemicals or something like that, that can be potentially dangerous. You cannot have open-toed shoes on. If you have long hair, tie it back. You don't want to be moving your hair around and get it into the flames. Same goes for dangling jewelry. Long hoop earrings, long necklaces, something like that. Again, it is better to be safe than sorry. If you're dealing with chemicals, you can use gloves. That provides a barrier for your hands. You don't ever want to be dealing with chemicals with your hands if at all possible. So it's recommended you wear the lab coat as well, heavy duty. If you're doing heavy concentrated chemicals, which you probably won't be, but nitrile or neoprene rubber gloves work out very well. Students typically have the disposable ones. So make sure, go into your room. Look, where's the extinguisher? Where's the blanket? Where's the eye wash? Where's the shower? Where's the body drench? Is there a first aid kit somewhere? Are there goggles? What are the aprons and gloves? What are these procedures? So make sure. Even this is something you can talk about during an interview. If you're wanting to be doing a lot of science, ask them, what safety do you have? What are the safety regulations or what's your safety procedures in the classroom? And ask to see the classroom. So at this point in time, the last thing is an open-ended question for you is what concerns do you have? And then also, are there any comments or anything that you have of that nature? So let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help out. But otherwise, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in class again.